Welcome back to the Intentionality Gurus podcast, where we explore the hidden drivers beneath the surface of our actions, habits, and choices so you can unlock your untapped potential and turn it into a meaningful impact. I'm your host, Karen Hale, and today's episode is called What's Fueling Your Life? We're driving into a topic inspired by the work of Jon Acuff, author of All It Takes is a Goal, and Todd Henry, author of The Motivation Code. Both offer unique but related lenses on how our most fulfilling moments can point us towards more joy, more clarity, and more traction. If you've ever wondered what truly lights you up and how to design your goals around what your fuel sources are instead of burning out, this episode is for you. Let us welcome Candace Pollock, because she is going to lead us in that direction.
So let me start with this core concept, Karen. Your most joyful and fulfilling memories aren't just nostalgia, they're data.
Yep.
So they're clues about what matters more than anything else to you. So when I say that, what first shows up in your brain? Like, oh no, I've got to have this idea and this idea.
So what matters most to me?
I mean, when I say that this is data, not just nostalgia, what shows up for you?
Wow. What I have to do next.
Yeah, okay, that's one way to think of it. Like
Yeah.
the have to do maybe sounds like a little onerous, but it's an opportunity to look beneath the surface of the where the iceberg is and see what's there.
Yep.
And I loved both books. I did the Motivation Code years ago, and I was really intrigued by what it revealed to me. And I don't know if it's still the case at the time. If you purchased the book, you would get the assessment without charge. But it has guided me for a long time now, so that I'm aligning with the things I do in a way that I'm ensured that the thing that's fueling me, that makes me happy about pursuing this project versus that project, is consistent with my underlying motivation. Going through the exercise, I was able to see the pattern. And until I was guided through the exercise, it never occurred to me there was a pattern.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So when I say that, what shows up for you in terms of your own life?
Well, I sometimes think that I know what it is that I want to do, that I'm passionate about, and then I start doing it and realize, why am I doing this? Or it's not even so much why am I doing it? It's like I just feel empty. I feel like I'm just going through the motions.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I've
So being
realized,
able to delineate between the underlying motivation and the stuff that kind of gets in the way that makes it not fun, like
right,
internet issues or having to draft something really arcane, yeah, can thwart that sense of joy and fulfillment.
right.
So in today's podcast, these are just two authors that I just thought had a lot of synergy for whatever reason. I don't know if they even know each other or of each other. But in my mind, there was a lot of commonality. They weren't the same by any stretch. They were quite different, actually. But it just piqued my brain in terms of um, how useful this is, and how often when we pursue goals and projects and undertake things that have nothing to do with where our sense of self-fulfillment. So
Okay.
has that ever shown up in your life, Karen?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of things that um, fulfill me, but as I've said in the past, I've always been this person that I've been trying to fulfill everybody else. Um, and recently, I've realized that it's if I can fulfill me, then others can gain from that as well.
So it's not you giving out
Yeah,
of
yeah,
habit, but
right.
in a way that you can share your stuff to give without depleting you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool, cool. So basically, the idea with Acuff and Todd Henry, I have to include his first name because I don't want you to think I think his name is Henry. Well, it is actually his last name, but suggests that you can reflect on these past moments and then see the patterns. And that's what we talk about a lot in the Intentionality Gurus is just notice. And then you'll start to see forks in the road where you have the choice and you could go down the path you're, totally familiar with that you do unconsciously and then make a choice about maybe exploring the other route. And so I'm taking that from the two of them and saying this is our personal fuel, and we can be looking at it and protecting it. So we're going to explore 3 ways where we can notice and harness that fuel, and maybe have some stories that we can reflect upon and take away some actions everybody could use today.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so joy isn't random. It's a signal. So what does that make you think of?
Joy is not random. So it's it's a signal to pay attention to what's happening around you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what is it that's triggering the joy?
Okay.
And so I had something silly yesterday. I had a mallard duck couple come into my backyard. I have a very small pond that I created in my backyard, and they walked around the yard as if they were looking at an open house or something like that. And they apparently decided to stay. And it concerns me because I also have raccoons and possums and so on that like to eat not just little eggs,
Yeah.
but also little ducklings. But it was a little joy moment. So what is it about that? And what I was able to eventually discern is not that it was a hard thing to figure out, but I really enjoy living in the city, but having nature here is if I'm not.
Right.
It's just having that experience of the outside, as one who is often indoors all day.
Right.
All right. So basically, paying attention when we do tend to reminisce, and it might be holidays that trigger these things and some of these memories, past events and so on. But what's a time in your life when you lit up and you clearly felt energized? When's the last time you can think of?
Um, Actually the last time, and it was so subtle. In March I went to visit my younger son, and initially he had told me, these are all the things we're going to do, Mom, when you're in town. I want to take you here, there, he just wanted to make it so special. And I got into town and none of those things happened. But we spent time sitting with each other and talking and watching different things on TV that either he liked or I liked. It was never what we both mutually liked, but it was exciting to see that I mean, I was just joyful for the 4 days that I was there. And when I got on the plane to go home, I started thinking about, well, did we do anything special? And then I realized we did. We spent time together.
Most special,
Yep,
probably.
yep, exactly. And yet, if I think about memories that I think are special, it's usually, oh, I went to this place and saw this, or, um, I grew roses in my backyard and they were, twice the size of normal or whatever. I would have thought those were those joyful moments. But just being was the most joyful thing that I think I've ever experienced in my life.
Well, and him as a young man now out on his own.
Yep.
How many years ago was he still living at home? He was young enough to be still living at home and so on. Not that you can't live there later, but that to see him be so successful in his career and living independently and so on. So how do you use that as a clue going forward?
So since I've been home, it's been very strange that I like being at home. Um, I I don't have to do anything spectacular. My husband every once in a while will say, you know, maybe we should go someplace special for dinner. Maybe we should go to a movie. And it's like, well, we could do that here. We're together. And I'm enjoying those moments more. I don't have to make them big, fancy extravaganzas so that all my friends and neighbors know about it. You know, simplicity has become part of my life. And if you would have told me this even a year ago, I would have told you, no, that's never going to happen. But I love it
And it never would have happened because
because I thought I needed all the bells and whistles and frills to create a memory, to create contentment, to find the joy in being with somebody. And, um, you know, my husband's been out of work, so he's around the house a little bit too much. But what I find is if I'm starting to feel anxious, I will take the time to go sit next to him on the couch and just hold his hand. And it's like, there's joy.
got it. Love it. Yeah, just great. And I imagine, when we're on our deathbeds, it's going to be those kinds of things that we reflect back on in terms of, our lives and those kinds of things rather than, did we go to Disney World or
Right.
those kinds of things, unless you're a complete Disney fanatic.
Yeah.
So the idea is connecting how we are dealing with life, experiencing life, being present and dealing with, whatever inspiration is coming to us in that moment and taking it and looking at it as a direction. Excuse me. So the other thing is we can take some of those things and design goals, and not to get into having to be doing all the time, but we are humans of the type that sets goals and objectives for ourselves. And so we can be just noticing what's so in our lives, those good moments and the maybe more challenging moments, and then use them as signals or compass points to guide us. I want like Goldilocks, the bed's too hard, the bed's too soft. Oh, this is just right. Or, the porridge is too hot, too cold, or just right. So what in your life do you feel you're pushing uphill about? And I'm
Yeah.
assuming you are giving me permission to make you my guinea pig again,
Yes. That's
since
okay.
I do that every time.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if it's age that is getting me there or being more in tune by, um, you know, taking different courses and reading more, but I'm realizing that my life is more about enjoying the moment. And if the moment is not enjoyable, accept it for what it is and know that there is joy coming. Okay. But I'm the one who has to make it. I have to see the flower to appreciate it. I have to look outside my window when it's overcast like it is right now and know that the sun is above the clouds. Those are the things that um, really bring me joy. Whereas in the past, I would look outside, see the clouds, and I would get gloomy just because I didn't see the sun.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. And it reminds me of a thing my sisters and I were doing for a while. I still do it, but just with myself. That we would send an email each day with one thing we were grateful for. So basically, practicing noticing things to be grateful for. And in fact, that was the byproduct that I came away with. That's why I continue to do it. That in time, I went from just noticing the things I was grateful for, then looking for things to be grateful for. And then now it's almost everything I engage in, I notice there's something to be grateful for, even if it, like my internet has been wonky. It's like, okay, well, then that is forced time where I'm not getting distracted by things on the internet. And since much of my work is over the internet, that can be challenging, I think is the word.
Yep.
Um, the whatever. And but it just that practice gives me joy. All right. I was telling you that I had a couple of mallard ducks in my backyard, and I can't tell you, like, I had a little smile on my heart when I first saw them walking around the yard like they were going to an open house, figuring out if they had enough, bedrooms or, whatever. They definitely have a little water feature. So in terms of this idea, in terms of, fueling some projects or a direction in your life, what do you think you or listeners might be interested or need to know about how to go about it?
Well, I think sometimes we just have to find that way to become mindful. Um, and I didn't truly understand the word when it started being thrown around a couple years ago. It was like, well, my mind goes here, you know, but it's not, I'm not centered. And when I started to understand that I had some control over that, I didn't have to let myself drift, then I started practicing it. And I think if our listeners can find that way to find their center, find that one thing that they can look at, whether, it be something on the computer, something that they're watching on TV, something nature, but become aware of what it is and how it makes you feel. And one of the things that I realize that is not so important to me anymore is worrying about what I'm going to eat during the day. When I was thinking about, what we were going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and what I had to get at the grocery store, I truthfully was gaining weight because all I thought about was, I had to buy food, we had to eat it, etc. A couple of weeks ago, um, I was talking to a nutritionist, and she brought up to me, "Why do you worry so much about food?" I said, "It's my culture." She said, "Well, you can change that." And instead of thinking about the food, I think about other things that motivate me. The food wasn't motivating me, it was something from my past that made me get through my day. And I feel so much happier. I'm not worrying about, you know, am I going to gain weight, lose weight, whatever. Um, and I feel healthier.
So thank you. I mean, that I think is a perfect illustration of the should driving the actions in the activity, and you were being dutiful and responsible around that, but it wasn't something that triggered good emotions. Not that we have good emotions. I mean, all emotions are equal in some regards, but some are more beneficial than others.
Right.
But to be able to notice it, and then, you did get that input, and then you had a choice to change course towards something that's different.
Exactly.
And so that, that's the point here, that to notice that the goals, projects, activities we undertake, the things we say yes to, can have both, have an element about it that aligns with what gives us more happiness and equanimity, and those that we're doing where it's a push, it's not a calling forward and
Yep.
filling us with energy and so on. Um, so when we're unaware of our individual motivational fuel, so to speak, we might pursue those things that look good, that are dutiful, that are, some of them are going to be necessary. I mean, they just go with the territory, with the kinds of work we might do and so on, or the dynamic within the family. But just that awareness can let you have an opportunity to shift and tap into the natural energy. So looking at the food responsibility, let's call it that, because you apparently were the person that had to undertake that,
Right.
got assigned that role. Um, what has shifted for you now and how you feel about it?
I feel much more content. Um, my husband is even more relaxed because I would start out the day, whether he was on his way to work or he was home for the day, you know, well, what are you going to want for dinner? Because I got to go take it out of the freezer or I got to go to the store. And I was putting a lot of stress and tension on the two of us. First of all, before he met me, and this is 40 years ago, um, for 10 years before that, he was on the road selling. And so meals were what he wanted at the time. So now for me to start asking him at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, hey, what do you want for dinner tonight? Um, you know, it has always caused a conflict between the two of us. Um, and many times he'll say, whatever you make is fine, but then I make it and he's really not in the mood for it. I see him pushing it around his plate. And so I've lived with this for over 40 years. And I realize I don't like this. And when I'm trying to so-called please our palate, I'm making foods that we shouldn't be eating or we're overeating. And so it's been such a revelation that it's not something that weighs me down anymore. In fact, there are many times it'll come time for lunch or dinner, and he'll just find whatever is available. He doesn't even think about what he's eating. The same for me. It's like, okay, it's lunch. I'll make myself a salad. But I didn't have to think about it for hours on end.
And be responsible for it, have that,
Exactly.
not the burden, but the weight of it,
Right.
even if it's a lightweight. I can appreciate what that must feel like. I had in-laws that were that way. We would be at breakfast when we would visit them in Florida. We would be at breakfast and they would start talking about what's for lunch. And then we would be at lunch and we'd start talking about dinner. And then we'd be at dinner talking about breakfast. And it's like, it wasn't how it worked in the
Yep.
household where I grew up. We got fed what we got fed. And, poor mom was responsible for all of that. But that was a different era.
Right.
How lovely to have choice.
Yeah.
And so, we can be thinking about what gives us energy when we're thinking, the past clues can inform us about now what kind of energy we're feeling, and just not just take it for granted that we have to go through those steps, just as you illustrated.
Exactly.
So the Acuff, and it's ACUFF, um, says it's important to design goals and projects and those kinds of things to be enjoyable. And, just for me, that was a little brain twist because, you know, I'm I'm a goal, he calls himself a goal nerd. I'm probably a goal nerd with, lowercase letters. I think his are all capital letters because he's a real demon when it comes to that. And Todd Henry calls it what satisfies our deeper motivation, that underlying thing that we're seeking. And for me, it is, the motivation code. I think it was really fascinating. That's when the idea, in essence, that's when I realize what motivates me in any endeavor I do is finding and turning untapped potential into strategic impact in a phrase. I crafted that phrase finally because the untapped potential is always there. The idea is, how can we, one, find it? How can we then determine whether we want to or can turn it into something that's more meaningful and more impactful. And it isn't just being busy, although that may look like that from the outside. When you look at my life, it sometimes feels that way, less so now than in the past because I've consciously designed it that way. So, where can you use some of these things that I presume, will now be paying attention to as lenses for what gives you that joy in life? How can you incorporate that consciously?
So I think some of the ways we can do it is for those of us who are working and sometimes find certain tasks, drudgery. We just want to keep putting it off because it's not enjoyable. We don't like doing it, but it's got to be done. Um, I've been working with two clients on this, and we try to find, I try to zone in on what is it that you don't like about it so that they know that and they can put that off to the side because we're not going to, now that you know that, don't worry about it. But how can we make it more enjoyable? And maybe it's not worrying about it so much, thinking about other things, finding a different way to do things. One of the things that I had found that was creating me a lot of drudgery was, after we do a podcast, I start posting it on numerous social media sites. And it was like, I kept rewriting it on every site. And it was like, it would take me hours to do it because I wanted to make sure it sounded good for Facebook. I wanted it to be, different on Instagram and whatever. And then I realized that I hated doing this, even though it was necessary. So I sort of came up with a plan, and the plan was, wait a second, sometimes uniformity is a good thing. So let's create this, and it can go off on all platforms. And so now instead of it taking me hours to do, it takes me maybe 15 minutes to do to write it up and then get it up on all the social media platforms. And now I sort of enjoy doing it because I can see the results very quickly because once it's posted, I can start seeing the response to them. What a difference it makes. So you got to start tweaking what you do to bring that contentment back.
Well, I can totally relate to that because I do coaching for a couple of national groups, and I have to submit reports. And in the early time frame, I thought I had to like talk about every little gurgle and whatever cough that the person shared with me because the people who were um, providing these clients to me needed some data in order to figure out whether the services were meeting the client needs and the member client needs or not. And I absolutely loathe that. For me, it would be like, holding me underwater. It just cuts the oxygen out for me. But in time, I was able to come up with just some key things that I discerned, and they never commented one way or the other. I don't
Yep.
even know if they read the things. I presume they read the things. But the point is to recognize that that is not the best use of my energy, and so on. And in fact, it thwarted the energy.
Yep.
Um, So in terms of, nuancing those things that feel like a good fit, again, it's kind of the Goldilocks standard, if it's too hot, too cold, kind of a deal. Um, and in work, the idea is that we can make sure that we're realigning things that, that what I mentioned before, but what is naturally energizing about it. That's why I love the two things. The other part with Acuff, I really like his approach to goal setting because he's saying make it a game. And the idea isn't to say, well, I'm going to do, let's talk about like podcast, listener ship and that kind of a thing. The goal wouldn't be I'm going to have X number of subscribers to a podcast. It would be something that you have direct control over,
Right.
which would be I'm going to do X number of podcasts and promote it on such and such 10 media sites or something. All right, that you would have control over. And the theory is that if we did those things reliably, then by the very nature of the algorithms and so on, it should improve listenership.
Right.
Um, aside from content, and the utility of those kinds of things. So where else in our lives do you think we can apply that kind of gaming theory?
Well, lately I apply it to just about everything I have to do. So, as many of our listeners know, I'm still recovering from a broken shoulder, and I'm at the point now where I'm weight bearing and I'm doing more and more exercises. Now, anybody who has to do exercises like this, in the beginning, it hurts. It's not something that you really want to do, but I've turned it into a game. Okay, I'll use my pulleys first thing in the morning and I will do it for 2 minutes. And so I have it set up in my laundry room. I go in my laundry room, I throw in a load of laundry, I work for 2 minutes. Okay, I clean up any mess in my laundry room and I'm out of there. Every exercise I have to do has become a game. And it's easier for me to do it rather than, as my therapist at one time said, oh, for 30 minutes, these are the exercises you'll do. Well, no, I do that throughout my day. And one of the things that you and I talked about a couple years back is when I'm in the kitchen, okay, I do my squats. And I'm doing it while I'm making my cup of coffee. So how long does that take? A minute? But I'm at least doing a minute worth of squats. So throughout the day, I'm exercising, but it's not painful. It's not frustrating. It's like, it's just part of the routine. When I'm in a certain room, I do certain things. And when I went back to the therapist last week, she said, oh my God, the range of motion you have in your arm. And it's like, I didn't even realize it. It was like, oh, I guess I do. So if you can turn it into some sort of a game, at least in your mind, nobody else has to know it is. Um, it just makes doing certain things so much easier.
I just, a lot of things were like popping off in my brain while you were talking. So that idea in the kitchen and doing the squats, I do squats when I brush my teeth. A friend of mine said that that's what she was doing. I thought, oh, I can do that. But it all originates with the BJ Fogg method of, the tiny habits that you find an anchor, something you reliably will do, that you know you will reliably do. And you can pick the times you do certain habit goals with the time of day that is most appropriate. And then you take one tiny step and then you just keep adding a step. You do one squat, for instance, and then you just keep adding. So I'm up to 50 every time I brush my teeth. So sometimes I do 100, sometimes I do 150. And maybe sometimes when I have brushed my teeth for the fourth time, I may not have done the squats, but I at least do it for that. The other part is I used to be an Intensati instructor where you do a aerobics routine with positive affirmations. And so I was learning a new program, a new session, and they have new music and so on. They would provide us with the music and the call outs. And I had left my car downtown for some servicing, and I was taking the bus home, and I was listening to the music, but I wasn't calling out. I wasn't practicing the call outs on the bus. I was just listening to the music, and it's really motivating. And so I had everything I could do to keep myself from moving around and getting into the music and stuff. Then I get off the bus, and then I had everything I could do to keep from dancing up down the sidewalk back to my house. And but when I got into the house, I swooped up my little dog, poor thing. I totally frightened him. And I was dancing around the house, and then I realized, oh, I could do my house cleaning with this music. All right. So whenever I feel like I don't want to do things, actually the way the goal should work is that when I do housework, because it's on the schedule, then I find my music thing and put my earbuds in and just do it. So that works most of the time,
What a,
and it's
what
fun.
a great
And it's fun.
idea.
Yeah.
Huh.
You could do it with laundry, you could do it with yard work, you could do, with all sorts of things. But anyway, so what did we learn today? What's the big takeaway that we think we want to tell people that they might, some actionable steps? I've got a few here. All
Well,
right.
I think the first thing that we can tell people is that you have to make the commitment to want to change, your what motivates you and to adapt to it. Just like you did with the music for house cleaning. I mean, you've just excited me because this is the week that I decided that my oldest son is coming to visit. Not that he is a white glove person, but I really want the house clean. And I thought, okay. And the thought of it has been like clawing on me. But there's so much music that I really haven't listened to recently that I like.
Yeah.
Wow, I could listen to the music and I could clean my house. So
Mhm.
thank you for that.
Or the other thing I was doing was I realized I did an exercise and I realized, wait a minute, I have a lot of self-development things in my life and I love that, but I didn't have true play. So the other little game I made is that when I needed to do yard work, I would listen to a fiction book. And I have huge joy doing that. It's just I'm out there listening to, some old novels that I've read before and so on. So anyway. Um, so, for listeners, what I'd like to suggest is, just pause from time to time and think about 3 moments, at a time possibly, in your life where you felt alive and fulfilled and deeply satisfied, like Karen was describing with her son in the beginning. And just ask yourself some questions, what is happening? Like what is the event or the non-event that you're engaging in? What were you doing or contributing? And were other people involved or not, those kinds of things. And then what kind of motivation was being fed? Was it, having a closer relationship? Was it building something? Or just, being calm and silent and puttering in the garden? What are those things? Write it down and then just start to look for patterns. It's just all those little noticing exercises. So you might be surprised about what shows up.
I love it. Well, we want to thank everybody for listening to the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. If this episode helped you see your goals and your motivation in a new light, share it with a friend and please leave a review. We were getting a lot of reviews here for a while. We're getting a lot of listeners, but I'd like to see more reviews along the way. And if you're curious about how to turn these insights into real life traction, email Candace at theintentionalitygurus.com to learn about our next self-command boot camp coming up in June. Until next time, keep noticing what fuels you because intentionality isn't just about doing more, it's about doing what matters. Take care, be intentional, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye bye now.
Bye.